the NDIS, Jane Hume mentioned it before, said there needs to be more reform. She actually said it needs to grow at the same amount as the economy. So not the 8% you've got it down to from 14%. Mm-hmm. Is that something you're committed to longer term?
That's a new announcement from Jane Hume today. That means huge cuts to the NDIS. And that would send a shiver up the spine of a lot of people who rely on the program. Now, we are way too late in the parliamentary term for these characters to still be making it up as they go along. They've got secret plans for cuts. Those cuts will make Australians worse off. We know that. Peter Dutton said on another program on a Sunday morning that there are lots of cuts, but they won't tell people till after the election. Now, this is a very scary proposition. You know, I think in this building, we're tempting to think that their economic policy is some kind of slapstick comedy, but it actually masks a much more sinister intent, and that is to keep these secret cuts secret until after the election, with grave consequences for people on the NDIS, people on pensions and payments, and especially people who rely on Medicare.
The NDIS is out of control, though, isn't it? As a Treasurer, you can't sit and look at the growth of the NDIS and be happy.
We're not sitting and looking at it. You know, we've taken very substantial steps over the life of this government to make sure that spending on the NDIS is still growing, but growing in a more sustainable way, cracking down on the rorts, getting it from growing at something like 14% to something closer like 8%, and we're on track for that.
There's more waste to be tackled, though, isn't there, or is there?
Well, we're doing it in the most responsible, considered, methodical way that we can, and where we find waste, we've shown an enthusiasm to deal with that. That's why we're getting growth in the NDIS to more sustainable levels. Now, if Jane Hume is saying that she wants growth in NDIS spending to be between 2% and 3% instead of 8%, then they need to come clean on what that means for Australians with a disability. That is a very scary proposition for a lot of people watching your program today and wondering what it means for them.
Well, she also indicated that she is looking to sack 36,000 public servants because she said she wanted it at the levels after COVID.
Let's see the detail. You know, they are way past due coming clean on what their agenda for secret cuts means for people, what it means for Medicare in particular. I thought two things were said in the last few weeks which are very important. Both Angus Taylor and Peter Dutton said in different ways. The best predictor of future performance is past performance. Peter Dutton went after Medicare when he was the health minister. Coalition governments always come after wages. They cut pensions and payments when they were last in office. And so they need to come clean this week on what are these secret cuts, what do they mean for people, where are they going to find the $600 billion to pay for these nuclear reactors?
Leaked during the week, the opposition's looking at increased defence spending as it promised perhaps 2.5% of GDP. Will there be an increase in defence spending in this budget?
Well, we're already increasing it and it's already budgeted for.
So there's not a further increase we're looking at Tuesday?
We'll update the figures, but what people can expect to see is the existing $50 billion plus that we're investing in defence over the course of the next decade.
So correct me if I'm wrong, is that about 2.38%?
A little
GDP?
bit over, yeah. By the early 2030s, we'll get defence spending to a bit more than 2.3% of GDP. Remembering it's 2 now. That's a very substantial increase. Now, again, if they're going to increase defence spending by $15 billion a year, let's hear how they're going to pay for it and what they're going to cut and what that means for Medicare.
You finally released the report by the ACCC on the supermarkets, but, you know, it's a bit of a damp squib as a consumer, I have to say. I didn't see any strong action against the supermarkets. The other mob are saying we'll at least threaten you with a big stick. What are you actually going to do about it? What difference does this whole process of the ACCC report make?
Well, the ACCC report, I think, is 441 pages from memory, and not on any of those pages does it recommend divestiture, because divestiture can have unintended consequences. What it's really about is more transparency, more scrutiny and more competition, and we're acting on all of those fronts, making the Food and Grocery Code mandatory, empowering and funding the ACCC, dealing with mergers and acquisitions, working with the states and territories on zoning and planning so we can get more competitors to the supermarkets. We are taking very decisive action to crack down on the supermarkets to get a fairer go for families at the checkout and for farmers at the farm gate.
Are we expecting less or more net migration in your budget predictions? Why do we need so much migration at the moment? Because it feels like we are becoming Kevin Rudd's Big Australia.
Well, we are managing the net overseas migration numbers down quite considerably. I think it was last week from memory in the migration figures. They were about 10,000 people fewer than what was anticipated. The budget will update all of those forecasts, but what they will show overall is the trajectory is down. That's deliberate. There was a spike in net overseas migration after COVID, students, tourists and the like, and fewer departures. We've been steadily managing that down, and we saw that in last week's
So
figures.
will it be 230,000? Will it be less?
You'll see in the budget.
Because the students are still coming in big numbers, aren't they?
You'll see in the budget. I mean, there's the international student market is an important earner for Australia, but it needs to be responsible. We need to make sure that we're managing that. And that's why we've taken the steps, or trying to take the steps that we are taking. Overall, we're managing the program down. We're doing that in a considered and methodical way, and you'll see that in the numbers.
What could you say to Australians who look at the strains on housing, on infrastructure, that are watching this and hear Peter Dutton saying, I'm going to slash this, about why we need this net migration at the moment?
Well, first of all, there's a horrendous inconsistency even in what Peter Dutton is saying. He announced he was going to do something, then he pretended he never did, then he pretended there wasn't an inconsistency. Nobody has any idea.
Yeah, but let me take you back to the point, because we're nearly out of time. Sorry. What would you say to Australians about why we need the level of net migration we've been having?
I'd say to them, we're managing net migration down and we're building more houses at the same time so that there are more houses for Australians to rent and buy.
How are you feeling about the election? Because if the government was to lose, your favourite to become opposition leader.
Look, I spent all of my time thinking about the budget and the economic plan and what we would do as a government and as a country if we win the election. I spent absolutely no time thinking about what I would do if we lost the election. I'd much rather be the Treasurer of Australia than the Leader of the Opposition. I enjoy the work I do for Anthony and our team. We work very, very closely together. And we want the economy to be front and centre in this election. Now, the stakes are high in this election because the stakes are high in the economy. There's a lot going on around the world. People are under pressure still. We've made a lot of progress together, but we've got a plan from here as well, and that's the difference between us and our political opponents.
You're seen as one of the best communicators in the government. Have you ever been frustrated the PM hasn't been able to communicate as clearly as you do at any time in this term?
No, never. And we've got a lot of good communicators in our cabinet and in our party room more broadly. And we work together very, very closely with the Prime Minister and with others to put together and convey an economic plan, which is one of the reasons why we're making so much progress together as a country. But we recognise there's more work to do, and that's what the budget will be all about.
Treasurer Jim Chalmers, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.